Today we're going to be looking at our next lesson in our series. It's actually going to be the first lesson where we're starting to build up toward the Crusades, but before we do so, it's important for us to get a couple background points on some aspects of Western European history that are really going to impact the Crusades. So sorry, Crusades don't start today, but today we are going to be learning about a really important element of it, the development of city-states in Western Europe. Now, city-states tie into our last lesson on those medieval pilgrimages and the formation of market towns and market fairs, because it is going to be these medieval towns that are going to drive the creation of city-states. Now, up till this point in this class, we've really spent a lot of time talking about the former areas of the Frankish Empire and what is becoming France. And we've talked a little bit about England. We've dabbled a little bit in Holy Roman Empire. But for a little while now, we're going to be focusing on Italy, which we haven't really discussed much since we briefly covered the Papal States. It is going to be in Italy that a lot of these trade towns and market fairs arise. And these cities are really going to benefit from this trade and these pilgrimages to a tremendous extent. If you want to make trade happen with, the Holy Lands and the pilgrimages out to the Holy Lands, the easiest way to get there is by sea. So all of these trade routes that go through the port communities in Italy. And if you're going to be transporting goods, it's easy just to get on a road, bring it down to Italy, put it on a ship, and transport it over. These towns are going to see some tremendous benefit. And it is here that we're going to focus most of our attention today. Although we're also going to briefly talk about Bruges up here, which is going to benefit for the same reason. You can travel by ship. Now, this trade is going to increase the wealth. It's also going to increase the power of these cities. And around 1100 AD, you start to see some of these powerful cities break away from feudal control. Northern Italy was a part of the Holy Roman Empire. It had been, the Papal States have been absorbed during Charlemagne's time, and we have them now in the Holy Roman Empire until they start to break away. Now, the government of the city-states itself. It's important for us to know they're also sometimes called communes. So in some of our primary source and source reading, we're going to come across the word communes. That is basically the same as today's topic, our city-states. Now, there is a variety of government within these city-states. Some follow kind of a feudal system-like government. They'll be ruled by counts or dukes, some of whom are independent counts or independent dukes, and some who owe homage primarily to the Holy Roman Empire. But many are instead titled republics. They're not republics in the sense that we might think of ourselves as a republic here in the United States. That is, we elect representatives and they represent us in government. They are, in fact, more like an oligarchy, that is, a rule by a wealthy elite. All citizens had a say in their government within our two most famous republics, that of Genoa and Venice. But qualifications for citizenship and citizenship rights were pretty strict. You had to have a pretty high property requirement to be a citizen. So you weren't involved in this process unless you were wealthy. Now, the Italian city-states in particular are going to grow really powerful because of those trade and wealth reasons. By 1200, we start to see the cities of Venice, Florence, and Milan having an explosion of population. Each of these cities has more than 100,000 people, which was unheard of for any Western European city even 100 years before that. So we have this booming populations in these three cities right here. And with this population is going to increase their power, and they're going to use that power to really push not just for their own independence, but for powers beyond their city boundaries. One that does an extremely good job of this is the Republic of Venice, which is a city right here, but it's going to extend its power into northern Italy and along the coast of the Aegean Sea. We'll actually see that they're going to extend their power into the Byzantine Empire as well. So this becomes a very powerful city. More on Venice. Republic of Venice is in northern Italy, and it's considered to be the most successful of these medieval city-states. To call it a city-state at its peak was even somewhat silly because it was almost an empire of itself. It had gone out and it had conquered parts of the world. It's because its economy was extremely strong. It had the best navy in the Mediterranean Sea during the Crusades. We'll see again and again and again reference to the Venetian navy during these Crusades. So we'll be talking about the Republic of Venice quite a bit. And by 1204, it had expanded quite a bit, and it had even conquered areas that had once been part of the Byzantine Empire. It was really expanding outward and taking over territory and becoming an empire of its own. Although nothing to rival the great empires of the world, not too bad for a little city-state in Italy. Venice was not the only leading city-state. There are a couple others that are worth mentioning. But like Venice, they really did develop based upon trade. In Northern Europe, we see fewer city-states, but there are a few that are worth mentioning. It's not really proper to call Bruges a city-state, although it could have gone in that direction. It was at different times affiliated with different entities. First, the Holy Roman Empire, and then the Hanseatic League. Its period as an independent city-state was not extensive, but it did develop as an economic and political power of its own, largely based upon the Northern European cloth market. I mentioned in one other lesson that wool was a highly sought-after trade good, and Bruges was Northern Europe's leading producer of high-quality wool cloth. So we have this wealth leading to city-state-like status for Bruges. We also have Genoa on the opposite coast of Italy from Venice, being very powerful and influential for much the same reason as Venice. It is the development of its navy based upon trade. Genoa will spend some time as a rival of Venice. Will also spend some time as an ally of Venice, depending on the political situation of the time. But mostly they are commercial rivals of Venice, both competing for trade throughout the Mediterranean. So to wrap up this lesson, I want to do a quick review of feudalism versus the city-states. Under the feudal system, your family name was really what was important. If your parents were a king, then you were in good shape. You were going to be fine. You yourself were going to be a king or maybe a count if you were a younger sibling. Likewise, if your parents were a count, you were going to do pretty well. You would probably wind up being a count or a baron yourself. In most city-states, it was your wealth that determined social status, which meant social mobility was more possible, both up and down that ladder. You could be a mid-level merchant, strike it rich by taking a chance, and move up that ladder. Likewise, you could be a premier merchant and make a couple of real boneheaded mistakes and fall down that ladder. So we have an increase in social mobility, which is an improvement in society. We know now today that social mobility is very important for a functioning economy and for a thriving society. So this is an improvement. It's not to say that these city-state republics were a fair and equal society. It was still, largely your family wealth that determined how well you were doing, and that wealth tended to remain in those same families. So it was still very difficult to go from poor to wealthy. We just saw a little bit more improvement a little bit more of a shift between the rich and the super rich. But we'll be talking more about the economics of the Crusades as we go through this unit on the Crusades. The economic factors are really important to what's going on, but this does conclude today's lesson on city-states.